I welcome all of you on behalf of Sri Aurobindo Integrated Life Center, Auro University, and Aurobharati, Pondicherry. Today we have with us Beloo. She doesn't need any introduction. She is kind of owning this discourse with Auro University. Though it is always pleasure to listen to Beloo because Beloo is deep into the discussion which happens on art and related to art. So Beloo, over to you. Just one more line which I'll talk about. Today, her session is on 3 purposes of art. I would rather, end with this, that Beloo connects very well what Sri Aurobindo talks on art. Normally, it is very difficult to explain and bring into the regular discourse what Sri Aurobindo talks through art. Beloo, welcome once again, and I welcome all the participants here. Thank you.
Thank you, Kiran ji. As you said, it's really kind of like our home ground. So, but any opportunity to kind of soak oneself into again and again into Sri Aurobindo's writings to kind of prepare for sharing some thoughts is always part of one's own inner journey, one's own sadhana. So I always welcome that opportunity. So I got this idea for this title, 3 Purposes of Art, simply, again, inspired by Sri Aurobindo. It's his writing, particularly his essay, National Value of Art, where he speaks about the 3 uses of art or the 3 purposes of art. So I'll just share my screen. Since we are talking about art, it's always good to have some artistic, so I do want to start with, the idea that, we have been talking so much about art and Sri Aurobindo and Sri Aurobindo's writings on art and the spiritual purpose of art, or how art connects with spirituality. So I thought, why not bring why not begin with Sri Aurobindo's art, Sri Aurobindo as an artist, Sri Aurobindo as a poet, and how his art, how his poetry inspires others to develop their own aesthetic sense, their own imagination, and their own artistic skills. So don't go by the date. Sorry, I think this date it's a little older when we were going to do this earlier, but we changed the program. So I'll start with a poem of Sri Aurobindo. And so consider it as also the 3rd purpose of art that he speaks about, the spiritual purpose of art. So let this be a way for us to experience some of that. So no explanation about the poem. It's just a small poem put into a video form.
Because Thou Art by Sri Aurobindo. Because Thou art all beauty and all bliss, my soul, blind and enamored, yearns for Thee. It bears Thy mystic touch in all that is, and thrills with the burden of that ecstasy. Behind all eyes, I meet Thy secret gaze, and in each voice I hear thy magic tune. Thy sweetness hunts my heart through nature's ways. Nowhere it beats now from thy snare immune. It loves thy body in all living things. Thy joy is there in every leaf and stone. The moments bring thee on their fiery wings. Sight's endless artistry is thou alone. Time voyages with thee upon its prow, and all the future's passionate hope is thou.
So the question we begin with is, why art? We just went through an experience which ends with the idea, a single occupation, a single joy, a single aim, the divine. Indian thought has always emphasized that all this world is a manifestation of the Ananda of the divine. It comes from Ananda and it merges into Ananda. So if all is for the delight of the divine, art, and why art? The question can only be simply addressed with a simple answer, simply for the sake of delight, of the divine's delight. And Sri Aurobindo at one place speaks about art for art's sake. But we live in times where there have been so many other viewpoints also. So just to kind of quickly look at how others have spoken of various purposes of art or the various uses of art, or as Oscar Wilde would say, all art is useless. Again, reminding us that we should not be looking at art from a utilitarian perspective. Rather, the uselessness of the art is the very purpose of art. So he's also reminding us the idea of art for art's sake. But again, other philosophers have spoken about that art helps us understand reality in a contemplative sort of way. It helps us get involved with the life and that is all around us and the life within us, and at the same time helps us understand or look at it or perceive it with some sort of a detachment. So there is involvement without involvement. Through a vicarious experience, we go through a lot of or experience a lot of emotions and feelings through art. Some have also spoken about that art helps us transcend all the purposes. But again, maybe here the focus is that all materialistic purposes, or again, simply for the sake of joy, for the sake of delight. Others have spoken about the educative role of art and looking at art in helping create a better society, a more perfect society. But in a deeper or in a much wider way, maybe that kind of a purpose should not be imposed on art, but that can be kind of like a byproduct that can come through an artist's because an artist also works in a context, societal context, a national context, world context, and art appreciation also happens within a context. So that subjectivism, as long as it is there more on the vital intellectual level, that can, in very important ways, connect with artist subjectivity, and an artist can be moved by the idea of documenting certain societal ills through his or her art, whatever artistic creation he or she is doing. And yet, at the same time, that cannot be the only reason for art. Others have also spoken about that it makes life more delightful, more charming. So Sri Aurobindo, in his seminal essay that he wrote when he was, still doing a little bit of the educational teaching work and also involved with the freedom movement, this national value of art. He spoke about three purposes or three uses of art: aesthetic, educative, and spiritual. And what's very interesting is that when you read through the essay, he's not only bringing in the the psychological or psycho-spiritual aspects of these three uses of art. He's also very conscious of the role of art in building nation. See, because he was in the freedom movement, he was also very conscious of what we are going to do with the freedom, and how freedom can only be, the political freedom, political independence can only be a part of a larger national project. So as an educator, as a visionary, he was very concerned about that. And in that sense, that if with that lens we read this essay, we also get a very interesting and very deeper understanding of this particular writing. So let's look at these three purposes of art in the light of Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo is again a very systematic writer. So he likes to speak about things in a very organized, systematic way. So we shouldn't be really, like put off by his long paragraphs, because when we really concentrate, we begin to see a very organized way in which he's building up his argument. So for the very first purpose, which is the aesthetic function of art, again, he speaks about threefold value of aesthetic function of art. The three sort of like, so within this first function, there are three functions that art helps us attain. So the first one is about purifying our outer conduct, raising and purifying conduct, how we behave. And there he reminds us that by helping us develop a taste for something that is decent, something that is more beautiful, more appropriate, more harmonious, we begin to develop some sort of a distaste for all that is rough, all that is crude and coarse. So that even translates into the coarseness of our, or the crudity of our passions or desires. So all that is uncouth and exaggerated in our behavior, we begin to feel a little bit of distaste for that as we begin to go closer and closer into art appreciation and then also art creation. Again, art here is not limited to only painting or sculpture or creating grand, architectural marvels, but or music or dance. It could be like, our simple acts of laying down a dining table beautifully for food, or embroidery, simple things that, women do at home, adorning our puja rooms, for example, or creating a beautiful column outside our homes, or creating a little corner in our room with a simple plant, and creating a sacred space, our own meditation space. So art can be looked at in many different ways, but the very fact of engaging in these kinds of artistic aesthetic activities helps us purify our conduct and helps us with, we begin to kind of strive more after what is decent and what is beautiful. Then again, Sri Aurobindo, being Sri Aurobindo in a very systematic thinker, he's also going to tell us that there is a limitation to this first function of the art. And that limitation is that sometimes there can be an exaggerated focus on only outer conduct, how we behave outwardly. So there can be a rigidity that can come in. We can get attached to a specific form of how to behave in a certain setting, for example. I took the example of dining room setting. Again, the idea could be, where the salad fork can go and the dessert fork will go. So sometimes a lot of exterior uniformity, dead convention, soulless ceremony, and all these things can come in. There is a limit to this aesthetic function of art. So Sri Aurobindo says that to go deeper into for allowing art to fulfill its aesthetic function in a little bit more deeper way, we have to go to this idea that what is more important, the inner sincerity, the inner freedom of thought, feeling, expression, the deeper and truer ways in which we elevate our consciousness, the higher feelings of love, seeking of higher thought. So instead of the exterior conduct, if we begin to give importance to these inner ways of elevating our consciousness, we go closer to a more deeper understanding of slightly deeper function of aesthetic function of art. And here again, Sri Aurobindo has reminded us that, he reminds in this essay, when we say aesthetic, educative, and spiritual, it is not that one is less important than the other. These are just three ways to understand three functions of art, but there is also a gradation happening. Initially, it will be aesthetic sense in us that will be more refined, that will be developed more through our association with art and artistic process or art appreciation. So there is some sort of a gradation, or you can even use the word hierarchy happening. And yet, Sri Aurobindo says, even when the art fulfills its first function, the aesthetic function, and I'm still at the very first aspect of the aesthetic function, even when it fulfills the first three functions of the aesthetic function of art, a huge conscious development would have taken place at the collective level. So as I said, he is very conscious of the role of art in creating a perfect society, or elevating collective consciousness as well for a future society or a more perfect collective life. So keeping that in mind, he's writing this essay. So the second function, or the second aspect of the aesthetic function of art, is when the idea of, or the sense of beauty gets connected with the sense of virtue. So what happens is that often, as there is a greater refinement in the conduct, the outer conduct, and a little bit more awareness of that inwardly also, we have to become, elevate ourselves and seek for truer feelings, higher thought. This also comes in that we begin to associate all that is beautiful with all that is good. So the pursuit of virtue often gets connected with a sense of the beautiful. So naturally, this means that the sense of ugliness gets connected with the sense of sin. And Sri Aurobindo there gives two interesting examples that what happens is sometimes, and this is a very common experience, especially in today's world, for a lot of people who have a little bit sensitive vital, if they are watching a film or something, or they are even reading something in the news, or watching something on the news where there is a lot of cruelty, torture, violence kind of things being shown, this seem not only ugly to watch or hideous to watch, but there is a revolt. There is a kind of like a recoil. So the sense of beauty and the sense of recoil gets connected with that. Another example he gives is that, which also adds to the limitation of this function of art, is that aesthetically, because we have developed a sense of beauty, certain excesses that are there at the level of sensual satisfaction, especially with physical desires, we begin to associate that with some sort of impurity. So virginity or more pure things become associated. Purity becomes associated with beauty, and certain sensual excesses become associated with a strong sense of impurity, sin. So what that leads to is some sort of a division or a conflict between the ethical and aesthetic sides of human pursuit. And if you read Sri Aurobindo's social philosophy, the book titled The Human Cycle, he has a whole chapter dedicated to this. And this is very true, especially in the more rational age, which we see much more, to its fullest development in the Western societies, where the aesthetic side, the pursuit of beauty, is often seen as coming in conflict with the pursuit of good. But in India, we have had the concept of Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram. So what is true is also good, Shivam, auspicious, and is also beautiful. But this conflict in a more modernistic, rationalistic, primarily Western societies, or those parts of our own societies that have been influenced by that, we begin to see that. So that's a limitation of this second aspect of the aesthetic function of art. And then what happens is either there is an excessive anti-aesthetic tendency, Puritanism, or lower forms of asceticism. Again, Sri Aurobindo is so conscious where he uses, this is exactly his praise, lower forms of asceticism. Higher asceticism will not deny a legitimate place to the pursuit of beauty, but a lower sense of sannyas, all that is there in the world is Maya and meaningless, and one need not be involved in that. There, a revolt against beauty can come in. Again, if you look at particularly like, history of Florence, in Florence before the Medici period, you'll see a lot of this excessive anti-aesthetic tendency, where they had problems with, why sculptures like Michelangelo and many others before him. Michelangelo comes in late Renaissance period, late European Renaissance, but before that, why they were making all these, grand sculptures of pagan gods and things like that. So, that was a certain puritanical Christian strain that came in. And in our own times, we have seen this happen in, with the destruction of Bamiyan Buddhas. Again, a very anti-aesthetic, puritanical tendency. So this is where Sri Aurobindo is cautioning us about. So the good must not be subordinated to the aesthetic sense, but it must be beautiful and delightful, or to that extent, it ceases to be good. So Sri Aurobindo again brings a more Indian understanding of the pursuit of beauty, that it is for the sake of delight. And there again, he reminds us in a very beautiful way, why does the existence exist? The very object of existence, he tells us, is not the practice of virtue for its own sake, but ananda, delight. And progress consists not in rejecting beauty and delight, but in rising from the lower to the higher, from the lower forms of delight to higher forms of delight. So from outer pleasure to a more inner sense of quietistic delight, if you will, which does not even need an object. And yet the pursuit of delight in life that's the object of existence. The less complete to the more complete beauty and delight. So this is, again, while he's still talking about the aesthetic function of art. The third and the highest aspect in which art's aesthetic function helps us elevate in consciousness is Chitta Shuddhi. And I think our speaker last time, Mr. Raghav Krishna, also reminded us of this very function of art, the purification of the heart's emotions. This is the most important activity of aesthetic faculty. And Sri Aurobindo elsewhere in a letter wrote to one of his disciples that once we have our aesthetic faculty more refined and developed, going inward and getting in touch with one's psychic, there is a greater preparation. It's a greater preparation for that. So if art has to fulfill its highest purpose, which is to help us elevate ourselves in consciousness and grow towards spiritual consciousness, this is where art begins to do that by helping us grow in our aesthetic faculty through this process of purification of the heart's emotions. Again, Sri Aurobindo there reminds us that, all kinds of emotion, all bhavas, all moods, for their own sake, help us go higher. Otherwise, we are confined in our outer evolution, not the inner being, but the outer instrumentation of the body, vital, and mind. We are coming from inconscience. So we have to let go of the bondage of all that inconscience and the animal state gives us. So by enjoying various kinds of heart's emotions through an artistic exposure, through art appreciation, and through the development of aesthetic faculty through art creation, it's a very important stage in one's own inner development. But again, Sri Aurobindo reminds us there can be a limitation to that, because these things can also be easily hampered by our own lower nature. It's because that's the nature of evolution. We are coming from inconscience and matter. So all those lower forms, the tamas of the matter, the inertia of the matter, and the animality of the animal forms, which gives us, the lower vital nature, demands and cravings of that can still hamper this process of purification of the heart's emotions. So what we really need to understand there is, and I mean, we don't have that much time here, so I'm not going to go in detail into how Sri Aurobindo defines or explains, both Sri Aurobindo and the mother explain about how our vital functions. But there is something called central vital in us, which is higher than the lower vital. And that's where the true emotions of love and beauty and delight can be there. And yet the central vital, that's the emotional heart. Just a little behind that is the psychic. And yet there is an inner vital, and behind that is the psychic, which is the spark of the divine. And yet in this heart center, which is a little bit higher than the chains of the physical vital, which is the lower vital, there is also the other side of these emotions. So love can also reside with fear, with jealousy, with rivalry. So again, the purification of these emotions is very important. And there Sri Aurobindo specifies how arts can help us. So he gives us a very interesting explanation later on as to how different forms of art helps us. So the process with which various forms of art can help us purify the hearts, the central vitals emotions, the central vitals movements. When is rivalry rising? When is fear rising? How can I purify this emotion? Is by what Sri Aurobindo says is, these are his words that are underlined, detached and disinterested enjoyment of the various rasas. And bringing in another example of from our own tradition of Natya Shastra, which makes it very clear that the role of natak, the role of drama, is to help educate and enlighten the audience, which is why Bharat Muni has listed at one place what are the qualities that a hero should have. This is not only the hero, interestingly, these are not only the qualities he's saying that the character who is the neta, who is the hero in the play should have. He also writes about the actors who play these characters should develop these, cultivate these qualities. And there is a very long list of qualities that an actor should have who is going to play characters, who's going to play the role of a hero on stage. So what are some of these qualities, for example? To be loving, generous, pure, diligent, firm-minded, intelligent, enthusiastic, learned. Just to emphasize the idea that it was very conscious in our cultural tradition that art has to help educate and elevate the audience. So the artistic creation process and those involved in the artistic creation process should also cultivate these qualities. So it's not just a preaching, it is also a very living, embodied way of growing in consciousness. So going back to the detached and disinterested enjoyment of the various rasas, I thought let's watch something and experience the various rasas. Just a very short little clip. Moving along, this is where Sri Aurobindo goes a little bit deeper into various art forms. So in terms of music, he gives a very interesting reference to Plato's work, where he speaks about how music can even affect the character of people in a collective life. So paying attention to the kind of music we are exposing ourselves to individually or collectively, it has a great impact on what we begin to value in what is the right character. This is again where the idea of purifying the vital, purifying the deeper emotions which form our character, or the connection between vital education and art and aesthetic development becomes very clear. Sri Aurobindo speaks specifically about painting and sculpture also, that generally what we are seeing more often, our mind is influenced by it. So if the eye, he says, is trained from the days of childhood to the contemplation and understanding of beauty, harmony, and just arrangement in line and color, the tastes, habits, and characters will be insensibly trained to follow a similar law of beauty, harmony, and just arrangement in the life of the adult man. So again, a very important advice for education, very important insight into education and into character development. The value-based education, there is so much talk of all that, especially with our NEP 2020 and all that, which is why, these are some of the ideas that have been taken up very significantly in this NEP, the new education policy, the idea of art-based or art integration in education. Of course, there is sports integration also. These are some of the ideas from Sri Aurobindo's and Mother's writings on education that have really made into the policy document. So going a little deeper into it, he tells us specifically why all kinds of art forms are important in their own way. Together, they make a perfect education for the soul. Poetry in specific raises the emotions and gives each of these emotions its separate delight. This is something for us to begin. If we have to grow in our aesthetic appreciation, we should try to see whether this is helping us, not in an analytical sort of way, but in a more contemplative sort of way. Is poetry helping us, raising our emotion and helping us to experience the delight of each of these emotions? Art, primarily this is visual art he speaks of, painting, sculpture, it stills the emotions and teaches them the delight of a restrained and limited satisfaction, because you have to confine what you want to express in a certain, maybe a canvas size, or if you are a sculptor, you have to look at it, you have to see what the stone is trying to tell you, what is hidden in the stone, which is trying to be revealed, trying to reveal itself. So restraint and limited satisfaction has its own delight. So that's how it helps us purify or elevate those kinds of, help us develop that kind of emotional intelligence. Music deepens the emotions and helps us harmonize each of these emotions with each other. So the harmony is very important there. So none of these things, Sri Aurobindo says, we should just reduce them to the mere satisfaction of sensuous pleasure. Unfortunately, that is what often happens in a popular culture, where these things are very much part of that popular culture, and yet there is a degradation that begins to happen. Now, Sri Aurobindo elsewhere in his writings on art reminds us very clearly that not all Indian art was of the highest caliber. There was much that was, kind of like on a, somewhat of the inferior quality. And yet, to be conscious that art also has to be raised to its higher and higher purpose, should be the pursuit of the artist. So often when art gets degraded to becoming a means to mere satisfaction of sensuous pleasure, it actually destroys or disintegrate rather than build the character, which is why often we see, older generations or parents or educators getting concerned about the wrong effect of popular culture, movies on children. So because art has been degraded to that kind of a pleasure. So this is so far up to about the first purpose of art, which is the aesthetic function of art. As I said, that is very important because that's a huge stage in collective human development. The second function is the educative role of art. And here, Sri Aurobindo is not talking about educative function of art in the sense of helping build, helping eradicate societal issues and things like that. That, as I said, could be a byproduct. But here he reminds about how art helps us develop intellectually, how it helps us grow in our intellectual faculty. In what ways? He says, because it makes the mind quick to grasp, open to, very quick to grasp suggestions. It subtilizes the mind because you are looking at various hues, various shades. Art also helps the mind become deep enough to reject shallow interpretations. It helps mind become more delicate, swift, and can also help us grow some sort of a mental intuitive faculty. Art helps us in this kind of training because when we are even in like in this image, this is a photograph. We can spend time thinking about whether this is a photograph just of some natural phenomenon or was it staged by the photographer. but there can be many stories that can come through this very simple picture. I actually had a little bit more elaborate picture earlier, but then something in me told me, why not just go with the simplicity? And yet each one of us can come up with a very different understanding of what this picture is trying to tell us. It's not just the contrast of the colors, but it's also the movement that is there. So it helps us create these raised images in the mind, which the mind then has to understand. This is not so much by analysis, but rather by self-identification with other minds. At this point, my first identification outside of my own mind is with the mind of the artist who took this photograph. As Mother reminds us, photography can also be an art if it helps us, if it expresses something that is beyond what is real in the nature. So if it takes us beyond the nature, beyond the realism of the nature, it can be a beautiful art form. So art is also a powerful stimulator of sympathetic insight. So how you empathize, how you sympathize with what the artist is trying to say by helping mind to grow into that sympathetic faculty, it helps us, it helps the mind become more subtle and more open to higher realms of knowledge. Again, just some pictures, especially if you look at the picture of this, Hanuman praying to, monkey praying to Lord Hanuman. I don't even know who the photographer is, but there is again such a beautiful story that one can make up just by looking at this image. So this suggestive nature of art, it helps the intellect become quicker in catching suggestions, and it helps the intellect become wider. So that's a very important aspect of inner development, the widening of the mind. That's a very important aspect of the widening of the consciousness. And in addition to the widening, art also helps us with the deepening of the consciousness, particularly the mental consciousness and the vital consciousness, because it helps us go inward about, to find out what are the inner meanings that the artist is trying to express. So we had Bindu Popli here in our series some weeks back, about a couple of months back. And this is actually a drawing she had done after her first visit to Matri Mandir. So there is no golden globe of the Matri Mandir here, and yet there is that tribute. There is a sense that one can feel that is going here. So art can help us develop that kind of a thing. So this is so far about the educative role. Okay, I see there is one question in the chat box. Can you explain how negative emotions in the central vital can be purified? Yes, we'll take up this question. I'm just about to finish this, and then we'll take up this question. The final or the highest use of the art, Sri Aurobindo tells us, is when it helps individually and collectively help us grow towards a more spiritual pursuit, higher pursuit in life. So let's see how he explains that. So again, everything that we do, in some way, it is helping us grow in consciousness. But when it becomes conscious of that highest and the noblest pursuit, that's when it really comes to its true fulfillment. So all human activity which can help us bring body, heart, and mind in touch with the spirit, that is the highest and the noblest purpose of that activity, which is true of the art as well. And there Sri Aurobindo gives a very interesting example that if you look at all world cultures, the ancient cultures which have had a very long history, the best and the most prolific periods in artistic creation in these cultures were, or in these civilizations were, when there was a direct connection between artistic activity and the deeper truths or the deeper seekings of the religious culture of that civilization. So he gives the example of Greece, Italy, and India. But then Sri Aurobindo is saying that, art is not only about the formal religion, because spirituality is way wider and deeper than formal religion. So the truer spiritual function of art has to be much wider than what the religious expression of art can be. And there he reminds us in a beautiful way, what is true spirituality? How is it different from religion also? He says spirituality, see, everywhere, if you read Life Divine, he has a very different way to define the same thing. In this particular essay, as I said, which is my focus today, he speaks of spirituality as a word that expresses 3 lines of human aspiration. What are these 3 lines? Divine knowledge, divine love, and joy. Love and delight he always brings together. He says the love, at one place he says, the secret word of love is delight. So love and delight are always together. Divine knowledge, which is the Atma Gyan of the self, divine love and delight, and divine strength, power. Never ignoring that aspect of divine as well. So traditions that only speak of one aspect of divine, their conception of divine is not integral. So Sri Aurobindo, being the integral visionary, always reminds of a larger, wider, integral vision of spiritual aspiration as well, for divine knowledge, divine love and delight, and divine strength. So when art helps us get closer to these lines of aspiration, that is the true spiritual function of art. And again, rather than me talking, let's hear from an artist.
So I was brought home, handed up to my dad in his arm, and the tradition was, okay, the father is supposed to recite a prayer in the baby's ear, welcoming the baby and put in some good words, So he takes me in his arm, puts his lips to my ear, and recites rhythms. He did dhagatite, dhagatite, kirdatite, and my mother was livid. She said, "What are you doing? You're supposed to say, prayers, not these rhythms." And he said, "But these are my prayers. This is how I pray." He said, "I am the worshipper of Goddess Saraswati, Lord Ganesha, and this is a devout Muslim talking. And this is the knowledge or vidya I got from my teachers, and I want to pass it on to my son. He is going to do exactly this. So why not start him early and give him these prayers?"
What a beautiful expression of how art or vidya, the seeking for knowledge, becomes part of one's spiritual pursuit or one's identity even. So moving right along.
So
sorry, I think I need to go back to. So the highest and the most perfect art, Sri Aurobindo says, is that which, while satisfying the physical requirements of the aesthetic sense, Sri Aurobindo never would ignore the skills, the technical, the knowledge, the outer knowledge that one needs to create art. So while the art has to satisfy these outer physical requirements of aesthetic beauty, it should look beautiful. It should be within the laws of what what the canon says about what is beautiful, what is harmonious. Art should also satisfy the emotional demand of humanity, the portrayal of life and outward reality. While art will do all this, the highest and the most perfect art will also reach beyond these, reaches beyond them and expresses inner spiritual truth. The deeper not obvious reality of things. What are these deeper realities? The joy of God in the world and its beauty and desirableness, and the manifestation of divine force and energy in phenomenal creation. So these are the deeper truths of reality, that divine has created all this, divine has manifested. This manifestation exists because of the divine's delight. There is divine delight behind everything. As the poem with which we started, there is a joy in every leaf and stone, Sri Aurobindo says. The joy of God in the world and its beauty and desirableness. Again, see how the idea of Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram comes so beautifully. And the manifestation of divine energy, divine force, divine power in the creation that we see, in the phenomena that we see all around us. So I, again, instead of taking some pictures of, grand masters paintings or grand sculptures, I've taken some very, things that are often not considered very artistic in the sense that they're not sold in galleries with huge amounts of price tags. So the top one is a simple column, but the elaborate design of the column, what the person who made the column, and I don't even know who this person is, I just happen to find it somewhere, and I have this habit of saving all these pictures from various sources. This is a portrayal of Sri Ram, Lakshman, Sita, and Hanuman, but all done in a column, which the artist knows, the column artist knows that the next morning or maybe even the same evening, it will be wiped away. But the delight with which all the effort has been put in is to experience the joy of God in the world and its beauty and desirableness. The second one is a very elaborate Kantha work. And when we had Ashima, Dr. Ashima speaking with us, she talked about the beauty of Kantha work. So I thought just making that connection. This is from some Bangladeshi woman. Her name is Suraya, but this particular piece of work, I mean, so much is happening if one were to just spend time gazing at it and looking at all that she's trying to express. But again, to experience the joy of God in the world, the delight in the world, the artist is creating this through embroidery. So as I said, all this is done because Sri Aurobindo is mindful of the role of art in vital education and nation building project, or in making humanity more ready for higher pursuits. So this is why he says that it's very important that all of us should develop our artistic faculty. Our taste should be trained. We should develop a sense of beauty and insight. Though it's not important that all of us have to grow into becoming artists. But as he says very clearly, a nation surrounded daily by the beautiful, noble, fine, and harmonious becomes that which it is habituated to contemplate and realizes the fullness of the expanding spirit in itself. So a lot of crudity in the outer behavior, starting from that, and to grow towards more harmonious, noble ways of connecting with others. All of these things can be worked out if we go through this process of developing aesthetic development. So again, another place he writes about, it's not important to have kinds of make our homes art galleries or museums, and yet be mindful of how we arrange things all around us, because that's where these habits, thoughts, and feelings of people living with us and all of us begin to become noble, harmonious, sweet, and dignified. So all over, how we set up things around us. There are stories of mother, really emphasizing this through her own example. So if we have time, we can go into that, but just, so I will this is going to be my last thing. I will end with this, and then we will take some comments or questions. So let's just, I hope most of the people here understand Hindi. He speaks a little bit of Hindi, but it's primarily in English. It's just a clip from a stand-up comedy act. It's a little satire, but see what truth it speaks of, and then we'll open up for some conversation.
If I pass tissue papers right now, all of you will be able to draw this. I'm talking about the national art of India called drawing a scenery. सबको आता है. We have 29 states, 140 languages, 140 crore people, 1700 languages. One idea of scenic beauty. विविधता में एकता, ठीक है. कश्मीर से कन्याकुमारी तक हर कहीं बच्चे बाहर देखते हैं. They're like, bro, this is beautiful. This is artistic. My artistic instincts have arose. I must draw this. And for some reason, it's always 2 mountains and 1 sun. But that's it. And it has been for 50 years. Uncle, पक्का correct, ठीक है. यही है. उस जगह में एक ज्योग्राफी की ले रखी है, जहां पे माउंटेन खत्म होता है वहीं से प्लेन चालू. नो ट्रांजिशन. प्लेन के साइड में एक रिवर के साइड में 2 पाम ट्री, एक हिरोशिमा एक नागासाकी खड़े उधर. Because as you all know, palm trees grow in areas with abundance of water. इस जगह पे एक लेबरर का घर होता है हमेशा. कच्चा घर, 1 डोर 2 विंडो 1 चिमनी. बिकॉज सबको पता है वो कोल से खाना बनाता है. Some garib lives there named Manjunath, कोई बंदा रहता है उधर. But each of those houses have their own private road.
So I hope that little video clip about the national art of India made sense in the context of having a little conversation about art education in the light of what we have just kind of, a quick recap of what Sri Aurobindo has said about the national value of art and the 3 purposes of art. So I'll stop here, and I know we are very close to 8, but if there are any quick questions or comments, let me open the chat box also. Excellent explanation, also divine planning. Can you explain how negative emotions in the central vital can be purified with the help of art? Yeah, so, it's like often when you, and this is again where we have to bring in Natya Shastra in particular, because Natya Shastra speaks very clearly about, we all have these emotions, let's say rivalry or, jealousy or fear or wanting to take revenge on something. Natya Shastra speaks about that. First of all, it speaks that all stories, all natak should end with a happy ending, and the right should win over what is wrong. Not necessarily good and evil in the moralistic sense, but what is true should win over falsehood, or what is positive should win over what is negative. So by bringing the story to a culmination where the truth wins over falsehood, vicariously we begin to get a sense, get an understanding that if I hold on to this negative feeling of rivalry or wanting to take revenge or anger, unprocessed anger over something, some wrong that someone had done to me in the past, I am going to end up like this character, for example. So often these characters would be there to show the impact, the effect of that negative emotion, so that vicariously you grow in an understanding. You don't have to experience it in your life, but by connecting it, it's like, the involvement without involvement aspect of it. So you are experiencing it and yet in a detached sort of way. So often, if you think about it, when we are watching a movie, if it is a beautiful narration, I say this because that's a very, important art form. And I'm happy to see Daljit ji has also joined us from SACAC, which is Sri Aurobindo Center for Arts and Communication in Delhi. So she can also speak about it. Cinema, I mean, not just the commercial cinema, but the moving form of visual art, which brings in all other arts, which is why Natya Shastra is so important, because Natak, drama, also incorporates several other art forms. Painting, when you are creating stage, set arrangements and all those things, costumes, so many, music, dance, all these art forms are involved in drama. Same thing with movie, filmmaking, it brings in all of these other art forms together as well. Writing also, creative writing. So because it's an amalgamation or a synthesis or an integration of these various art forms, yes, Arkaji, theater is also a form of visual art and also a very important performing art. Many art forms are part of theater. So through that experience, when it is done right, as a rasik, as someone watching a movie, watching a film or a documentary, I am vicariously experiencing while yet not fully engaged, because it's not happening to me. So I'm not feeling the pain that I would feel if that story were happening to me, that situation was happening to me. Yet I am connecting with, on some level, with the character to whom that particular situation is happening. So that disinterested involvement helps me work on my emotion if I have a similar emotion there. So in that sense, art can be a great cathartic. Sri Aurobindo uses that word in his essay. As I said, it's a longish essay with 5-6 parts. So I'm trying to summarize it given our time frame. Sri Aurobindo very much uses the idea of catharsis. This is the chitta shuddhi, purification. Chitta is where all the impressions of everything that we experience get stored. So purification of that. So often bad things also happen to us. Negative things happen to us as well. So the impressions of that are stored. So when you experience, and yet in a detached sort of way, those negative impressions, those impressions of the negative emotions can be cleansed out, purified out. So in that sense, that's why I think we had Dr. Ravi Bhushan, who spoke about the role of literature in helping purify the emotions. So that's what it does. We get absorbed, and yet there is a distance. We know. So often we have this experience also. We want to watch the same film again, even though we know exactly what is happening, how the story will play out. But that absorption, involvement without involvement works on our emotional level. So I hope that's answer to your question, Vijayata ji. Anything else from anyone? So Mohit, yes. Oh, good to see you, Mohit. I don't see you, but I see your name there. Thank you for the excellent presentation. Yeah, so does the artistic techniques, tools impact the educational aesthetic? For example, we are seeing a lot of AI generated. Could you share your views? Yeah, I think I'm going to refer to Daljit ji, because this is a question she might also be dealing with as director of SACAC, because this would be very interesting if she will share. I have some thoughts on it, but Daljit ji, I would defer to you in this one. Very good question, Mohit. Thank you.
Yes. So, hello, everyone. We all are like, thinking over this AI thing, which is like, we wonder, is this going to take over? Because all sort of art AI is able to. But all our conversation, faculty conversation and everything is around that. The main idea behind that art piece which we are going to create, the inspiration, and inspiration is very, very important part with the art thing. Like from where the inspiration is coming and how you are applying that inspiration in your art. That inspiration AI cannot generate. That is the individual journey. And what we are going to suggest to AI, what we are going to command to AI, like what you want, that understanding, I think every artist need to have. Otherwise, like, so it's comes down that the execution work or something is like AI is going to do, but not where art has a lot of storytelling, narrative. That is very important part of, and these narrative and stories are very real and reflection of the lives we all like, go through and all that. So what we have come to the conclusion, AI is just a tool, but cannot like, because each artist is unique and we see the unique art pieces when it comes, and that reflects the individual, it's not only the skill capability, but individual's understanding and journey that reflects in that individual's art. So that is what I feel through the art. And the previous question where the purification of this, I just want to add one thing, that what we curate to read, to watch, to indulge with is very important to how those art, what we are watching or listening or reading, have an impact on our vital purification. So that is the curation is very, very important. The discipline of curation, like what am I engaging with? Because there are so much art around us which titillate your vital, but am I going to indulge with that, or am I going to look or read, or I'm going to aspire to get better art where I will engage myself? So these are the two thoughts was like coming to my mind.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Very well pointed out. Yes, how we choose, the discernment is very important. So yes. So I think, Mohit, your question is well addressed there, because as I think, again, Sri Aurobindo says at various places about the higher faculties, we have to go beyond what our senses tell us to those realms of higher inspiration. If that's the true role of education also, to open ourselves to the higher inspiration. AI cannot be really, it cannot work there. So it has to be a different kind of inner development to, to open oneself to those higher ranges of inspiration, right? So that's a more subjective development. So yes, thank you. I also see something from GPT, chat GPT. Yes, right. So the question has been answered. Chat GPT is one of the AI tools. Thank you, Daljiti. Very helpful. Okay. Any other comment or question from anyone before we close? So, but it's been really interesting, how this series has been growing in terms of the various aspects of the connection between art and inner development, or art and spirituality are coming through in the light of Sri Aurobindo's and Mother's writings on art. So we have probably in the future, we'll have a little bit more specific sessions on Mother's writings on art, and because she herself was both a musician and a painter, so her perspective is also, and her explanation of art and yoga, the connection between that, how art can grow, how an artist can grow into becoming a yogi, are very important. So maybe we'll take up that as well in the coming weeks. But thank you so much. If there are no other comment, okay, there's one more message. Okay, yes, there's thank you. Spirituality starts from inner journey, inner living. Yes. Daljit ji, any final word or anything? Comment?
Yes, it reminds me, Mother, one quote like, art should reflect the times we live in. So that is very, very important, that when we are like, art is not some fantasy, but it's a reflection of the times we are going through, we are living in. And it's an expression of, like, like poet will write through words, painter will paint with brush and canvas. So it's like, but it should reflect what we all are going through. It might be our own journey. It might be societal things, political things, whatever you want to express. But it should not be away from all this. It should not be only that it's a just for the pleasure. It's hanging in the gallery and the beauty and all. It's not. If it's a time which is like reflecting difficult phase, then we can portray that as well. So how we can look at art in each and everything and find the ways to express that. That is what I feel the artist dharma, like, not only to just the beautiful pictorial kind of art. It's not only that, like Mother used to curate personally all the photographs, which like that photography saloon, which ashram used to, now the Robida is not there, but I have a long conversations with him on like how Mother used to look at each entry of the of the images and comment on that. Why this image should be part of this exhibition and why this should not be, and how she have that point of view where that art, she was not only selecting very pictorial and beautiful images, but the images those were reflecting that time, because that was the tough time, that post the Second World War and all this. Then and the lot of photographers were raising their voice through their images, and that has really generated a lot of conversations in the world, and it has changed many things in the world through those images. If that is what it was very interesting to know about the journey of a photography saloon, what ashram used to have that exhibition every year and used to invite entries across the world. That was a really good. So this is what I feel like for the artist and the journey of an artist.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very, very powerful. Thank you so much for bringing that perspective. Very important. And I think photography is a very important tool, especially with photojournalism and the documentary aspect of photography, and or even like painting. Picasso. Some of Picasso's work are very reflective of that chaos. And I think that's where I think in the Indian tradition we also have this idea of what kind of it goes in with this idea of deities also, like what form of deities you should have in your home, what kind of artwork you should bring in your home, and what belongs outside the home. So in a public space, there could be certain forms of deities. In a temple dedicated to a particular form of deity can be there. And yet in your home, if you want to if you're seeking a greater harmony, stay away from a certain kind of forms. So not denying the truth or the need to have different forms because they express different aspects of reality. The divine power is also, when the Sri Aurobindo speaks of divine power, the power aspect of divine, there is also going to be the Raudra rasa, the destruction, or call it creative destruction if you will, to use, to use a more modern phrase. So even that aspect can be expressed by the artist, and it's important to be expressed. So very well said. Thank you, Daljit ji. I'm very happy you joined, and I'm grateful to everyone who joined and took the time. I think we'll stop here. And yes, Arka ji, I read your comment about art helping to protest and deliver social message, undoubtedly. So I think we can just stop here, and we look forward to having you with us. I think, Satya, is that you or is
Yes, ma'am.
Kiranji still with us? I know she had to.
Yes, ma'am. She left. So she wanted me to thank you for this wonderful presentation. And on
Oh.
behalf of our university, SLC, we
Oh.
thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. Namaste, everyone. Have a good night. We'll meet again.